All right, YouTube. Obama has become the first U.S. president to visit Hiroshima, the site, of course, of the dropping of the atomic bomb on Japan. One of the two. Everybody forgets about Nagasaki for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why. And cue, of course, the chorus of people saying that the United States should apologize for the atomic bombings. Now, two things here. First and foremost, it was not necessary to drop atomic bombs on Japan. That was essentially the cover for it. The idea was Japan had built up its military capabilities on its mainland, and so the United States, should it have tried to invade, of course, it would have suffered heavy casualties in doing so. That's just a cover, though. In truth, a lot of the Japanese preparations had been made outside of Japan. That is, they were, building things up, building their tunnels, setting their mines and so forth elsewhere. And we had already suffered through the worst of the tail end of the Second World War by the time we had essentially isolated Japan anyway, surrounded them. They no longer had much in the way of air power. They no longer had much in the way of naval power. It was essentially just whoever happened to have a bamboo stick or a rifle actually within Japan. So the dropping of the bombs themselves was really more about testing the power of the atomic bomb, and the idea was not simply to defeat the Japanese, but to exert such absolute hegemony over them through the use of these atomic weapons that it would completely break their spirit. There would be no more even the possibility, not even the slightest hint that anyone would take up arms once we actually did invade, because the level of death would be so butcherous and insane, and so terrifying to the Japanese people that they just wouldn't fight back. It would break their spirit. Their idea of having like a godman, nationalist, imperialist, Japanese leader, the idea of their military supremacy, their invincibility would be shaken by the fact that two of their relatively large cities were completely gone. They were nothing more than smoldering craters. That being said, though, the United States does not need to apologize for dropping the bomb on Hiroshima. That's my belief. And here's why. Most of the people alive today in Japan were not around when the bomb was dropped. Most of the people alive in the United States today weren't around when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. Those that were old enough to even remember those events are extremely geriatric. They're in their 80s right now, and pushing 90s, I believe. And, it just doesn't make sense to ruminate there on the past. We've already tried to build up good relations with Japan. They've become one of our most steadfast allies, one of our most important allies, especially within the Pacific region, since that period of time, because I think they've realized those Russians and Chinese over there now have the same weapons and worse, and really are perturbed by their very presence in the Pacific, whereas the United States is like, oh, please send us more Pokemon cards. It's the time of the past, essentially. There's no reason to remember the things that happened then other than to, I guess, count your blessings that there are no more atomic bombs being dropped right now, and to, of course, the Japanese shedding tears over their dead loved ones, which makes sense. That sort of thing should be remembered. I think this is one thing Obama's done that actually makes sense. It's like the Cuban deal. It's funny because the GOP keeps complaining about the things that he does that actually make sense, like ending the embargo on Cuba, video for later, ending the arms embargo on Vietnam. They complain loud and long about that, and then when he does something that's actually fucking retarded, like tries to pass the TPP, allows the NSA to spy on everyone, perturbs Assad or whatever, when he does something actually shitty, they sort of bend over backwards and don't do anything about it. So they're the agent of their own misfortune there. But U.S.-Japanese relations are good. There's no reason to rock the boat by apologizing for something that happened so many decades ago. And those that supported the move had their own reasons for supporting it. Well, if we had invaded, 100,000 more Americans would have died. We had to break the spirit of the Japanese because they had gone, stir crazy or something. And those that they think it was a bad idea, they'd be like, oh, well, we should have taken the losses as they came or just blocked Japan off because we were already surrounding them. It doesn't really matter. That's all in the past. The people in charge of commanding those endeavors are all dead. None of them are left. They're all long gone. They're all in the grave. As far as the fact that civilian centers were targeted, I think that was butcherous and insane. But you've got to realize that lays the groundwork for all of the thousands of nuclear weapons in the world today and where they would be used. And I think the greater issue, really, is still the grand chessboard, mutually assured destruction, and the interplay between the U.S. leading NATO and its various alliances, the Mutual Defense Treaty of the Americas, the Reciprocal Defense Treaty of the Americas, various military treaties in East Asia, and increasingly South Asia as well. Between that and the Russian and Chinese spheres, really these three cores of power in the world, with all of their nuclear weapons. Rather than worry about what happened that long ago when we were in the very dawn of the atomic age, what we should be working on is trying to forestall another, atomic event happening. I don't feel optimistic about that. I do feel optimistic about mankind's chances as a whole because we're more durable than some people think. Even in the face of great adversity, you look at the Black Death or something like that, people still muddled through somehow. I think it would be wiser to spend that time worrying about trying to find ways to prevent, an actual nuclear war from occurring, which would, it would affect the Japanese too. You think Tokyo wouldn't be a target for China's nuclear arsenal if something like that happened? Of course it would be. Tokyo would be a target. Taipei would be a target. Saigon. All of these cities, Manila, all of these cities around the Pacific region would all get nuked off the face of the earth, and a hell of a lot more people would die with modern nuclear weapons than the primitive, which is what they were, atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I think, yeah, it was an unfortunate period in human history. You can debate all day. There's really no, here's the problem, there's really no straight answer. About whether it was actually necessary and proper to nuke these cities off the face of the earth. The fact that civilians were targeted is obviously negative. I would certainly feel that way. As far as was it excusable because of what the Japanese had already done to the Chinese, to the Filipinos, and so forth, who can say? It's morally subjective at this point. It's also ancient history at this point, and I think there are bigger things to worry about. It'd be a little bit like when people argue over the Civil War here in the United States. Someone says the South will rise again. Someone else says no, it won't, and the war was justified. Well, that's ancient history. Nobody who participated in those hostilities is still on the face of the earth. They're all in a grave. Most of them have been in a grave for a century or more. Why is it such a great concern to even worry about such a thing? What you should be looking for is human healing thereafter and saying, oh, well, we're still all Americans. Well, like with the United States and Japan, we're allies now. No, there shouldn't be any bad blood between these two nations. There doesn't need to be. The Japanese culture is great. United States is great. Why the hell would we want to, worry about who shot at who so many decades ago? It's just not necessary. So those are my thoughts on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's back in the news because of Obama's visit to Hiroshima. I think it's good of him to visit it. I think it'll help relations. Obama generally destroys relations between the United States and its allies by conducting surveillance, by trying to force his cock down their throat. In the case of the Pacific, he's done somewhat better than with Europe or Latin America or certainly the Middle East, some of these other regions. So at least his Pacific pivot, bad as though it may be for our abilities elsewhere, at least mostly it's achieving its goals. You look at Vietnam, you look at what's happening in Korea. Now they're begging us for nuclear weapons. A morally subjective debate can be had over whether that should really be encouraged or not. That's about all. Peace out.